Hey everybody, real quick, if you need a Season 2 recap of The Mandalorian, I've got you covered. There's a tab in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you right to it. Season 3 picks up 2 years after Season 2. Grogu has been training with Luke for quite some time, but now he's back with The Mandalorian. And The Mandalorian wants to get back in the good graces of his own people. He heads to go meet with the Armorer, and he comes in a perfect time because they're going through a ceremony initiating a brand new Mandalorian, a child, when they're attacked. They're having trouble fighting off this beast, and the Mandalorian is the one who finally puts the kill shot in. You would think the Armorer would be thrilled to see him, but she's not. She tells him, "You're no longer welcome here because you're not Mandalorian. You took your helmet off." And he says, "Well, the creed teaches us about redemption," but she shoots back, "Redemption's no longer possible since the destruction of our homeworld." He figured she would say that, and he's brought some good news regarding that topic. He recently came across something that suggests that the mines of Mandalore still exist. Up until this point, they thought that everything was destroyed in the Purge. It's an artifact that has Mandalorian inscription on it. He got it from Jawas. Jawas got it from somebody else who claims that they visited the surface of Mandalore. The Armorer says, "Well, this just proves that the entire place has been crystallized." But he reminds her, well, somebody had to go get it, which means that it's not as poisonous as we once thought. He then asks her if he visits the planet and he brings her proof that he bathed in the living waters beneath the mines of Mandalore, will she forgive him? And she says yes. Before they head off to Mandalore, though, they're going to need some help. They head to Navarro, and boy, it's a lot different. It's no longer this barren wasteland. It's a pretty hopping trade market. It doesn't, however, forget its past. It has a statue of IG-11 in the middle of the town. Although the statue is made up of IG-11, or at least what was left of him after he self-destructed. The guy in charge of turning around Navarro is the same guy they came to see, Greef Karga, who in the 2 years since we saw him last is now the High Magistrate. The two old friends get acquainted quickly, Greef assuming that the Mandalorian will want to live in Navarro and he's willing to give him a place, but the Mandalorian says, "No, actually, I'm not here for that." He tries to explain to Greef that he took off his helmet, he's trying to get back in the good graces of his people, because with the other Mandalorians, he might be a pariah, but on Navarro, he'd be well respected. In the middle of their conversation, a droid walks in and interrupts it, telling the High Magistrate that there are pirates in the courtyard. And Greef Karga has done a really good job of trying to get pirates out of Navarro. So the fact that they're back, he's got to tend to the matter at once. He heads out to the courtyard, as does the Mandalorian, and he finds pirates who want to drink in their old establishment that's been turned into a school. And they're not taking no for an answer. Greef tries his best to convince them to leave, but they're just hard-headed. This results in a shootout that involves the Mandalorian as well, where Greef and the Mandalorian take out all but one of the pirates. Karga tells Vane, who's the last remaining pirate, to tell his boss, Gorian Shard, that Navarro is no longer welcome to pirates, and then he lets him go. As they're walking back to the High Magistrate's office, Karga tells Mandalorian, "I'm going to level with you. I need a marshal." Cara Dune left after she brought in Moff Gideon. She was recruited by Special Forces. Ever since then, I've been doing it on my own. The Mandalorian cuts off Karga and says, "What happened to Gideon?" And Karga tells him that he was sent off to a New Republic war tribunal. But then he gets the conversation back on track saying, "Well, what do you think?" And the Mandalorian reminds him of the whole reason why he showed up. He needs to get back in the good graces of his own people. He didn't just stop by Navarro to catch up. He stopped by for help. He needs a droid and one he can trust. And the one he wants to use is IG-11, who's dead. He points to the statue in the middle of the square and says, "We can just reprogram him. We can get him back to life. I mean, half those parts up there are the original IG-11. And while it seems bold in nature, it's not impossible. So Karga gives the Mandalorian the okay to see what he can do. While the Mandalorian tries his best, he ultimately fails. He's able to wake up IG-11, but he's not able to wake him up to the IG-11 he knew. The IG-11 that wakes up is defaulting back to his old programming, which wants to kill everybody. And that's a problem. Karga tells the Mandalorian that it's just too big of a job for him to do himself. But the good news is Navarro has the best droid smiths in all of the galaxy. If anybody can fix these IG-11s, it'll be these droid smiths. So they take the remaining parts of IG-11 to the droid smiths, but they give him some bad news. The droid is cooked. There's nothing they can really do for it. The problem is the memory circuit board is broken. And the Mandalorian says, "Well, just put in a new one." But they tell him that's going to be tough to do They don't make them anymore. Their suggestion to him is just to get a new one, but he's not ready to give up on IG-11. He trusts them. He asks the droid smiths, if I go find this part, will you fix it? And they say, yeah, sure. Go ahead. So the Mandalorian and Grogu head off, telling Greef, hey, keep IG-11 safe until I get back with that part. While flying to find this part, the Mandalorian decides to teach Grogu all about being the Mandalorian in a ship, how you have to keep your head on the swivel, and what the certain things on the ship mean, like fuel and radar detection. And as he's pointing this out, he gets unwanted visitors. 3 pirates are behind them, and it's Vane and 2 others. They're out for revenge. They picked the wrong one, though, because the Mandalorian starts flying through the galaxy, and it's not too long before Vane's buddies are all destroyed, either at the Mandalorian's doing or because he drove them into asteroids. But when the Mandalorian flies out of the astrofield, he comes across a giant ship, and he gets pretty concerned. It's Gorian Shard's ship, who tells the Mandalorian to stop where he is because he's outgunned. The Mandalorian tries to plead his case, saying, I have no quarrel with you, but Gorian Shard doesn't want to hear that. Because Gorian Shard does have a quarrel with the Mandalorian. He destroyed 4 of his fighters, ignoring the fact that his fighters were chasing the Mandalorian. He demands that the Mandalorian surrender his ship or else, and the Mandalorian decides to pick the or else option by taking off into hyperspace. He flies to a planet named Kalevala, which is another planet in the Mandalorian system. He lands his ship at a Mandalorian castle, and when he walks in, he finds the person he's there to see. Bo-Katan, who looks miserable. He tells her, I'm here to join you, but she says there's nothing left to join. When she returned without the Darksaber, her forces melted away. He then asks, where's the stolen fleet? And she says they're making their way through the galaxy as mercenaries. Bo then asks the Mandalorian, do you still have the saber? And when he says, I do, she tells him, then you go lead them. Wave that thing around and they'll do whatever you say. He turns the conversation back to Mandalore, saying, so you just gave up your plans to retake Mandalore? And Bo, who is at this point a little agitated, says, your cult gave up on Mandalore long before the Purge. Where were you then? Go home. There's nothing left. He shakes his head and says, no, I'm going to Mandalore so I can bathe in the living waters and be forgiven for my transgressions. And she calls him a fool, telling him there's nothing magical about the mines of Mandalore. Those mines supplied Beskar ore to the ancestors, and the rest of it is all superstition. She says, that planet has been ravaged, pillaged, and poisoned. But if you want to go, be my guest. The mines are beneath the Civic Center in the city of Sundari. He thanks her for this information and then says, I'm going to go find out if this planet is really poisoned. And him and Grogu head off. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or 2.